Hello and welcome to The Rewind, where we dive into the making and legacy of various films from cult classics to award-winning masterpieces. Today's film is Warlock, the horror cult classic that stars Julian Sands as a son of Satan who travels from the late 17th century to the modern era with the mission of compiling the pieces of the Devil's Bible in order to undo creation. Also starring Laurie Singer and Richard E. Grant. Warlock is a movie of many different categories. It's a time travel movie, it's a chase movie, it's a supernatural horror film. Above all, though, it's just a really entertaining cult horror classic. And joining me today to talk about Warlock is Michael Pereira, a Toronto-born filmmaker who, after 12 years as a critic for the prestigious Bloody Disgusting, has delivered his distinct brand of genre cinema through movie shorts and the feature film Beyond the Chamber of Terror, which you can now watch on Tubi. Michael, thank you so very much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, the first time that I watched this film, so there's a common theme throughout my series of episodes for the Rewind in that my older brother, about 6, 7 years older than I, back in the 80s and 90s, had a video card. You can hire out VHSs, and a lot of the movies that he watched, he borrowed action films, sometimes horror. This was one of those horror movies, and this movie was really distinct to me because number one, I didn't even know that a male witch was a thing. I mean, when they explained what the warlock is, I didn't know that this was just a thing. And the other thing that I thought was cool about the movie, outside of the great practical effects and everything else, was Julian Sands, because at this time, a lot of the villains that I came across my young age of watching movies had a very distinct look. They looked like bad guys. Julian Sands didn't look like a bad guy. He looked like a romantic leading man, which is what he was. So that was another thing that really stood out. And it was just a movie that I absolutely loved because of the momentum. The whole chase aspect of it was fantastic. The mythology behind it as well. And it's still a film to this day. I just watched it only like a couple of days ago, and I still enjoyed it immensely. Michael, do you remember the first time that you saw Warlock and what your first impressions of the film was?
Yes, I do. I actually saw it on opening day in theaters back in '89. I remember even the theater I went to go see it, which doesn't exist anymore. But I remember seeing the trailers and being, well, TV spots at the time, really. But I was drawn to the concept. And yeah, no, I didn't really know much of the actors at the time. Aside from, yeah, no one really. But I knew obviously Steve Miner, who directed it. Um, was definitely a draw. But yeah, no, I was a kid in Toronto who loved horror movies, and whenever a new one came out, I would go to the opening night. And Warlock did not disappoint. I fell in love with it like from day one, and it's been a movie that I've constantly go back um, and it's amazing how it just still works. It just entertains. It's so breezy, and you watch movies now that just struggle to have like these tight narratives. And this movie, for an hour and 40 minutes, just no nonsense, goes in, does everything it's supposed to do, in and out. It's fun. Yeah, I know. I fell in love with it from day one, and then soon picked up the VHS, had DVD. Obviously, recently the the uh, the re-release from Lions from Trimark, isn't it? Yeah, the no, it was not the well, it's a Trimark release, but it was the
Is
Vestron
it
video, which I don't think it ever released
right?
on Vestron. But it was great to have the trilogy, and I had never seen the sequels till just recently when you asked me to join you on this. I haven't seen the sequels till now. So
I liked Armageddon. I thought that was pretty cool. Different, but cool. But yeah, the first movie though is the standard of those three Warlock films,
yeah,
for sure. So it all goes back to the screenwriter named David Twohy. He's the one who came up, excuse me, he's the one that came up with the conceived the story. And David Twohy is actually an important person in Hollywood. Not only was he a co-writer on The Fugitive, he wrote and directed one of my favorite films, alien invasion films, in The Arrival, which starred Charlie Sheen. He pretty much came up with with the whole kind of Riddick character and did the Chronicles of Riddick afterwards, which Vin Diesel played as well. So he's kind of like a player, but at this time point, he hadn't done anything yet. I think he was due to work on Critters 2, but at this point in '85, he has the script. Originally, he said that what his story was that he wanted to make the Warlock somebody as the good guy, a person who's persecuted, during the witch craze of the 17th century, and then he goes forward in time to experience that the same persecution was happening during the modern day as well, which would sound like a kind of like an interesting kind of maybe drama or something
Yeah.
of the like. But when he announces this, when he makes his pitch to a producer named Arnold Culberson, who at the time was producing Platoon, so this was like in '85, I think he came up to him and brought kind of like the first 14 pages. They kind of worked on the initial kind of story, but then where he kind of really felt that he couldn't do much with it, and that's when they kind of changed things about and brought more of a horror aspect. They changed the Warlock into more of a bad guy and such. But that initial kind of idea of having a witch or someone claimed to be a witch from the 17th century go into modern day and find that the same kind of biases and everything else kind of sticks around. That does sound like an interesting idea for a movie in some sort, doesn't it?
No, definitely. Also like just the David Twohy is an incredible. At least I don't know how you pronounce the last name, but I'm assuming I've heard a couple times it's saying that way. But he's a really great genre writer. He knows how
Mm.
to balance higher concept, being sophisticated enough, but still not forgetting the B roots of genre. And it's everything like Below too, like a very underappreciated his submarine horror movie. Really great. Perfect Getaway. Like a good fun B picture. He knows how to straddle being clever, but also knowing the demands of the genre. Yeah, it's just yeah, there's something kind of effortless about when he writes genre, like The Arrival too. Like a really, I mean, we've seen all these kind of tropes before, but it always feels very fresh when it comes from him. So yeah, I love David Twohy, and
I
this was my
think
introduction to him. Yeah, I can't think of. I mean, I've seen other movies that he, but it was the first time where I took notice as there was the writer behind it, and then obviously I followed everything, and yeah, it's incredible. Obviously, everything leading to Riddick, but I think that the roots of like you see it in the Riddick movies, it's all there. Being smart and sophisticated, but yet never kind of talking down to its audience. Like that's kind of his thing, I find.
what I really loved about the writing in this film is all the different kind of mythos and rules that he kind of brings to the whole witch aspect of it,
Yes.
which I thought was interesting because throughout the film, it's like another new kind of thing, and the element is brought up from the witch hunter who Richard E. Grant plays, Redfern, and it's like at first he's talks about the use of salt and how how witches loathe salt. And then you have that cool witch compass that's used in the movie.
Yes.
Later on, you have the Blessed Hammer, which you can actually hammer nails into the witch's footprints and it'll affect him, and all these other things. And then, of course, you got the Devil's Bible that's in the film, which they call it here. What do they call it? The Grand Grimoire, the Grand
Yeah.
Grimoire, I think they call it.
Yeah.
Again, another kind of interesting thing, and it kind of these kind of elements that are kind of sprinkled throughout the film adds another twist to the whole story. And I thought that's a really, really cool way to kind of bring about the kind of like the mythos, the world building, the rules that a lot of that this movie has in spades. And I think it's a really cool thing that he does in this movie.
Yeah, and it's very clear and concise, the rules. Like you always know, like it's never cluttered. Um, yeah, no, it's fairly effortless. Again, like I keep going, but there's something about this movie that just doesn't feel like it's ever straining for anything. And also I feel like just juggling. One thing I find like, the humor is like like as serious as Richard E. Grant and Julian Sands, they're playing it like Shakespeare, but you throw Laurie Singer in there, it just adds obviously she kind of represents our point of view, um, bringing kind of a sense of humor to it, but never overplaying it. Just and obviously Richard E. Grant has a lot of great comedy, but very kind of straight, like very playing it straight. Yeah,
I think the scene that made me laugh a lot is that here is this kind of time traveling witch hunting, badass with a whip and everything else. And but when it comes to the concept of him going onto a plane, a concept that's like 300 years removed from anything of
yeah,
any sort of reason, he quivers like a child in the spade of it, and
yeah,
just the physical acting that Richard E. Grant does in that part. Again, it isn't out of step, it isn't over the top or anything. It's just very kind of natural. You can actually understand where this man from the 17th century would not want to go into that metal thing with
yeah.
wings. Such I think that's a really kind of great use of comedy in there. And of course, Laurie Singer gets some pretty good one-liners throughout the film as
Oh, there's
well.
so many funny one-liners. Yeah. Oh, there's so many great lines.
So when it comes to Steve Miner, supposedly he wasn't the first director that was signed on. So I read Hollywood Reporter said back in '87 After 2.5 years of developing the script. A director named Robert Collector was actually signed on to direct, and he did movies kind of like Night Flyers and Red Heat, not to be confused with the Red Heat of the Schwarzenegger Belushi one. Is a totally different one. And they actually rewrote the screenplay. There was a person named Dennis Denobi who wrote it, who's actually a very well-known producer. He produced Heathers. He did Ed Wood. Recently, he done like things like Danny Collins' Focus. He's actually quite a big producer. Anyway, he kind of rewrote the screenplay. That screenplay was presented to Steve Miner, and he said, "I don't want to do this." And then when he saw the original script, he goes, "I want to do that." So him and Tohi worked back, stripped all the stuff that was like added to it, went back to the original kind of screenplay kind of stuff. And then Minder said, "Yes, okay, this is what I want to do. We've got a great script here." And Miner, before this, he's already established himself. I'd argue that Friday the 13th 2 and 3 were probably the most essential of the two movies in the series, right? Because the second one you actually have Jason Voorhees, the third one you
Yeah.
introduced a hockey mask, and they're under his direction. But he also does House, and he also does that really kind of strange comedy Soul Man with C. Thomas Howard that came out in the late 80s, which I remember
Which I've
seeing when
never.
I was a kid. Oh, it's something else, man. Give it a shot, but it's something else for sure.
I love House.
So he,
House in particular is a personal favorite of mine.
yeah, and so he signs up to do this film. But Steve Miner again, not a name that people would like. If you say, "Hey, Steve Miner," like people would, the mainstream person would say, "Oh, I know who that is." But people in our world, we know him because of the importance that he has on a lot of these films, and he's still working today. And I think that, but for me, I think Warlock was just he does a fantastic job in this film.
Yeah, he's a solid craftsman. Consistently, he'll come in, he'll jump in. He's quite a bit chameleon too. He can seem to do anything and affect. Hall and H2O coming into a genre and bringing a kind of a class to it. Yeah, he's a really solid, very underappreciated filmmaker. But I agree with you. Friday 2 and 3 are definitely the ones that kind of set the tone for the sequels.
So he comes on, and now we have to cast the film. So straight off the bat, they know they have to get English actors. I mean, we're talking about this is like colonial United States. From what Steve Miner said, these guys have only been off the boat for 5 years, 10 years at the most, like they're English. And so that's what they're looking for. Some really interesting tidbits I found in regards to some of these characters. So the Warlock character, supposedly back in '87. So this is when so Platoon would have come out, and of course the producer was working on Platoon. That was his film. He presents it to Willem Dafoe, and so Willem Dafoe was considered for it, but he didn't want to commit to it unless he can revise the screenplay. So they said no. So they kind of moved on from that. Also, I read this interview that Julian Sands did like 5 years ago. Well, actually, was it 7 years ago with Decider? He said that when he signed on, they said Sean Connery was going to play the role of Redfern, which is another kind of
Int-
interesting kind of tidbit there as well,
Yeah,
because around the time he does Highlander. So
yeah,
maybe it
very
was kind of
similar.
like a very similar. But at the end of the day, they do get Julian Sands to on board, but originally they wanted him to do Redfern. So they wanted Richard E. Grant, who looked like, from the look of him, he's all kind of rough and kind of stuff like that. He was going to be the darker character, and Julian Sands was going to play the heroic kind of looking one. But I think it was I don't know if it was Tuhi or Minder. They said we need to switch this because I think it was Tuhi actually said I think it might be minor, but actually said I can see a darkness in him. I don't know what it is, but I can see a darkness in him. Because, like I said, at the time he did like Room with a View, but he was not perceived as a terrifying person, but he could sense he could play terrifying. So they switch the roles. So there, Julian Sands was going to play Redfern. Now he's playing a Warlock. I don't know about you. Great decision right there.
I agree, and it's funny that you mentioned that. I feel like it almost feels like a precursor of Terminator 2, which
Mm,
also does the reversal, right? Because the Terminator 1, you clearly see, the Terminator is big and intimidating, and which I feel like, you know, I categorize Warlock as a post-Terminator movie. It very much follows the model of that structure, which so many genre movies you know, picked up the time traveling aspect, the fish out of water story. I feel like it's very much the Terminator template. But now that you think of it, it almost feels like it predates Terminator 2, that reverse. Because it's true, you'd think like there's no way Richard E. Grant could not best Julian Sands, but I think it's a very clever choice. And Julian Sands again playing it very wisely, like low key. Actually, I was surprised coming back to it. How understated his performance is. Which generally, part like that, you'd think he'd be chewing scenery, but he really downplays it.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. So Julian Sands says that when he was offered the role, he was actually in Poland. This is a time when during the communists were still in power there, and it was winter. And so the number one, the idea of working in California during the summertime was just absolutely very appealing to him to take on. But the other thing he said is that he kind of viewed the film more kind of like as a black comedy than kind of like a slasher, because of course Steve Miner known more for his the movies we talked about with Friday the 13th and such. And he also said that when it came to portraying the Warlock, he said it was it was like a Shakespearean experience because he's the Warlock is kind of like this classical, whimsical stage villain. The way he uses language, smile, movement, the wickedness to it all. Looked like he really had a treat playing this character. And but I mean, he came back for the sequel, like what, 5 years later. So clearly,
Yeah.
this was a great character for him to play. And I dare say, it is if you're going to ask people about Julian Sands, a lot of them might point to this one as being the movie they think about, the performance they think about when it comes to his career.
I think so too. Yeah.
Laura, go ahead.
No, no, no. I agree with you. I mean, aside from like Boxing Helena is another one that I feel like he's really memorable in. But yeah, I'd feel like this is like for me growing up, that was this is the one that I gravitated toward. Even watching the sequel, which essentially plays it very differently. It almost feels like an entirely different character.
Hmm.
He plays it much bigger and meaner. But yeah,
And it's what's really interesting about Sands as well is that he started off being like romantic classic leads, and it seems like afterwards he was kind of like played more villainous characters than maybe he anticipated from after
yeah,
doing this. But he did do Arachnophobia as well, which is a really great performance from him in that movie. You
yes,
mentioned Box and Helena, and unfortunately passed away. What was it last year that he passed away, or the year
yes,
before?
yeah,
In
yeah.
a
Very
very
unfortunate.
kind of tr very tragic kind of like mysterious kind of circumstances behind it as well. So yeah, God bless him. He had a great career and he gave us great performances.
Yeah,
Um, Richard E. Grant as Redfern. So, like I said, Sean Connery supposedly was attached to this. I couldn't find any other articles suggesting this besides what Julian Sands said in his interview. And then you got Richard E. Grant takes on the role after they do the swap. Supposedly they read every English actor available in America, and when they couldn't find that, they went to London, and then they found Richard E. Grant, who had just done With Now and I. That was like the biggest film he did up to that point.
yeah,
And I thought he is fantastic in the role. This is like his first American kind of like like showing in many ways, like in a Hollywood movie. But yeah, he's fantastic in the movie because not only did we talk before about the how he can meld into physical comedy, but he has such an intensity about him as well that he brings
yes,
to the role. In that while you see kind of like, you were saying before about the physical stature of both actors, you can see, you don't see kind of like how Richard E. Grant can best Julian Sands. I think the intensity that he brings to the role, because his character is pretty much on a revenge kind of like an aspect of things.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of it does a great job in this movie.
Yeah, yeah, no, it brings a lot of vulnerability to the part. As big and gruff as the character is, the stuff with the wife is handled very sensitively, and yeah, he's a class act. Yeah, and I've never seen him look so big ever again in a movie. He looks,
Mm.
you watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, he looks so meek, but here he's just yeah, larger than life.
I think that big kind of coat thing that he had on him kind of
Yeah,
helps
yeah,
with that. But I think like a lot of the characters that he would play, I think a lot of people would kind of harken back more to the With Now and I of things, kind of
yeah,
like eccentric kind of characters. Maybe he might be like in a period piece or something like that, or play dweebish characters, or villainous in kind of like more in a kind of sleazy way. But yeah, kind of like the action kind of man kind of thing that he kind of brings to this. You don't see that again, but again, it's just fantastic because he brings something to the role which is just different than say if you had a classic action movie character who was in the role. And I think it's fantastic. The whole thing about Redfern's wife, like in the film that the Warlock had killed his wife. and that's why Redfern is just hell bent on destroying this guy. Um, Supposedly, uh, I think it was Julian Sands on an interview during the making of the film, which I found on YouTube. He said that the Warlock got possession of Redfern's wife and then dismembered her piece by piece, and that's kind of like her kind of death right there. Um, I tell you what, if something like that happened to anyone, I imagine you would want to go as far as to jump into a tornado time warp loophole thing to get revenge on them throughout the film. It's a very kind of gnarly kind of backstory there, isn't it, for like a character to have motivation to go after someone.
Yeah, and I think they're wise to keep it all those details. Kind of. I think you get enough information that you need to not kind of bog the story down because the movie always
So
has a great forward momentum. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. There is a moment like where she asks Laurie Singer's character asks him about his wife, and he kind of like very kind of hesitantly goes into some details. Like we know that he did something, but we don't know what it was. So when I found out exactly what it was that the Warlock did, I was kind of rather shocked by it. Who
Yeah.
knows? I know there was a lot of deleted scenes in this movie. There could have been a scene somewhere, or maybe somewhere in the script, and maybe they showed this and they
Yeah.
decided not to go ahead with it. It could be a possibility. Um, Laurie Singer, Cassandra with a K, her character in the
Yes.
movie. I could not find anything interview-wise or anything at all from her in regards to her experience in the film. She is great in the movie. I mean, before that, her biggest kind of role was Footloose. She played character
Yes.
of opposite Kevin Bacon. Um, so I think the reason why she has doesn't talk about the film, so for all by all intents and purposes, it was kind of difficult. She was having difficulty on the movie because of the makeup effects. So her character gets a curse from the Warlock, where she ages 20 years a day. I don't know about you, but when you get into your 40s, it kind of feels like that every day anyway. But
Yeah.
her character's 20, then she wakes up 40 and 60. So it's like a 2 or 3 day kind of like journey, this whole movie. And so while she said that she was cool with doing the makeup effects at first, when it came to actually doing them, and the person who was doing the makeup effects in this movie was Carl Fullerton, who he did things like later on he got Oscar nominated for Philadelphia. Before this movie, he did Alter States and FX, like a really great kind of like a effects guy,
Yeah.
makeup effects guy. Um, she did not want to go ahead with it through a lot of it, so they had to kind of like do different things, which is like shadowing, put on the grey wig and such. But by all indications, there was actually prosthetics and such that are going to do with her. And like when it comes to the 40-year-old application, especially, had no part of it, even though at first she was all good with it. I maybe it just has to do with you hear these stories sometimes from actors about being under hours and hours of under makeup, and sometimes it could be claustrophobic, sometimes it could be like it could be irritant and whatever. Maybe just the thought of just seeing yourself transition in 20 years could have a psychological aspect as well. I don't know, but it's kind of a disappointing thing to hear in regards to these makeup guys put a lot of effort into putting this stuff together, and then all of a sudden they have to like not do as much work, even though I think they did a great job with what they could. She looks great in the movie with the hair and the fingernails and everything. I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty cool. But
Well, that
overall, what do you think
explains a
of the?
lot why it explains a lot why it's probably not as great as it could be. So
Hmm.
they probably had to kind of pull back on it, but it works enough because the humor is great. You'd never feel like her performance is affected by whatever she was going through because she brings a lot of great humor in those moments. And also, it's a great device anyway to keep the story moving, right? Having these stakes and having there's a real sense of urgency of finding the warlock, as opposed to dragging it out and
Well, I mean, that's the cool thing about this movie. It's essentially, I'm not going to go into any more cast, but essentially it's these three players. Like it's their movie, the three of them. People come and go throughout the movie, but it's them three especially. And all of them have a motivation. All of them have something that they need to achieve to be whole. The Warlock, of course, being the son of Satan, his thing's all about undoing creation, finding this the devil's Bible. Cassandra. She has the curse. That's why she's tagging along. She needs to get her bracelet back to get the curse off. Redfern, has to get wants to kill the Warlock for revenge for what happened to his wife. All three of them have something going on, and then on top of that, it's kind of like you have the end of the world kind of aspect of it. That if he wins, then all of creation's undone. So we're kind of rooting against him, even though he's a great villain to root for at the same time, which is a nice little, like
Yeah.
juxtaposition there as well. And I think something that a lot of films, even films back in the 80s and 90s, but I think the films back then maybe did a little better as opposed to films of today. The stakes throughout the films, a lot of the stuff we see these days is kind of like big time stuff. An alien coming from a galaxy who's going to eliminate half the universe, whatever. That's kind of big stuff. But the
Yeah.
small ones where it's personal, it's intimate. That's the stuff that really I think gets it going. And so when it comes to this chase movie, like this movie, which essentially is a chase movie, um, I think we really invested in all of these things when we're out to all these characters, especially when it comes to Cassandra and Redfern. We want to make sure that they achieve what they need to achieve at the end of the film, and I think that's something that's just great screenwriting at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah. I would say also they also do a great job of raising the stakes by the human casualties that they encounter, with the child, which I totally forgot about him eating children.
Mm.
Which is like, and also even the Mennonite character, which is great, like that little set piece, like such a memorable character. I remember as a kid, and still, like, and when he loses sight, so like, you really feel the human casualties. Where a lot of movies, they're just kind of, adding to the body count. But here you never feel that. You feel like when someone dies, you really feel the weight of it. And that's something that really caught me off guard watching it again. And maybe that's why it's resonated. Is this, with the kid or anything like that, you really feel, does a great job of making the Warlock intimidating. If he can kill a child, you know, and and anything's possible with him, right? There's no rules.
We need to talk about that a little later on. That scene. There was an unfortunate kind of thing that happened in real life that kind of mirrored that. Actually, we'll talk about later. I just want to talk about the production. So it starts off in 1987. They start in Salem in Los Angeles. So the budget then was $7 million. So this was New World Pictures who was doing the film then. The budget by the time they really start getting into things had gone up to 12 million. So that's 5 million plus, which made it the most expensive film in New World Productions at that point. Um, and what's really interesting about it is that even though it was a $12 million production, it was the most expensive, it actually made them quite a bit of money because they had two different release dates for this film, which is kind of interesting. You spoke before about seeing the film in 89. Pretty much everywhere in the world got it 80 in 89. Because that's time for the film to come out. In America, though, it came out in 91. It sat on the shelf for 2 years. And the reason why it's out on the shelf for 2 years is because New World had financial difficulties and they went bankrupt. And so they couldn't release the film
Oh,
in the US. So it actually sat on the shelf for 2 years until they can figure out what was going on with their finances and such. And it was a quite a long kind of case. New World were suing these people, producers were suing those people. At the end, Trimark takes on the American distribution. They released the film in 91, so they already had the one release date, and they released the film in 91. And from the 91 release alone in America, they made $9 million in a limited release, which again, that's just like a little bit of a bonus on there. A film comes out 2 years
yeah,
later and still makes $9 million for a 12 million budget film. That's on top of what they've already made in international markets. I imagine by
yeah.
then it would have already come out in VHS in like a lot of these places as well. Um, but it was also an interesting thing where Trimark wanted to publicize the picture's New York City premiere by burning a witch near the boathouse in Central Park. The witch was supposed to rise up, reconstitute itself as a demon and utter warlock. And it was actually implied in the article that Trimark did not receive permission from park authorities to perform the stunt. Sounds like a pretty cool stunt to try to pull off, and I really kind of
Oh
dig
yeah, it
when you
feels like
go
something out of
go
42nd Street days, right? So
yeah, well, I love that kind of stuff because back then, like they really had to go to extra mile to get people in cinemas and such to do this kind of stuff. And it's better than like these days where you have, I think these days people don't really do that stuff. Maybe I remember during the release of the It films, they had red balloons kind of everywhere in different places. That kind of, but
yes,
that's kind of like nothing compared to something like this. So I think this sounds really would have been really cool if they could have pulled it off. I mean, it sounds pretty pretty far-fetched, and such. Have you ever come across anything in your time covering films and such, anything kind of cool, kind of like publicity stunts that you've seen people try to pull off to get people to their movies? I think another cool one was Smile. Remember they had just people randomly smiling
Yes.
throughout the city, and there was one, I think it was like a Toronto Blue Jays game or something in the
Yeah.
States, baseball game. Maybe no, actually,
Yes.
maybe it was in Canada, but it was just a woman smiling, and they picked it up on the camera, and it
Yeah.
turned out it was a big marketing thing. That's pretty cool marketing there. Real simple,
It's
but
funny when
really
you
effective.
mention. Well, it's funny when you mention it because it was shot here in Toronto, around Ontario. So the balloons, like the house isn't too far from where I'm at, the actual house, and the balloons were still there months later, still hovering around. So it was pretty wild to see that. But publicity wise, you were telling me about a great publicity, which again, now you're telling me about the 91. I feel like you're right. I didn't see the 89 because I'm thinking Batman 89 was kind of what consumed, and I wasn't really seeing movies on my own in that year. So the 91 would have made a lot more sense. I totally forgot that there was a delay. I remember, yeah, reading in Fango, about Warlock ages ago, and then always wondering, why was it delayed?
Mm,
But yeah, no, it's good that you mentioned that. But I'm trying to think of great publicity. I think of Men in Black,
mm.
where they had people dressed as Men in Black in front of the theater because we had seen an advanced screening of it. Um, yeah, they even had the neuralizer, and so, which we had at that point we had no idea what it was, but they were kind of telling us to look at it, and they would have the flash, and we would never understand the concept until we seen the movie. But I remember, yeah, they would go out all out like that for movies. Now you don't really see it as much anymore. Um,
It's more of a
Warner Brothers is the
online
only one that does that.
social viral stuff now, right? That's kind of like where they put most of their
Yeah,
bread and butter and stuff like that these days, it seems.
that is right. That is right. But I remember, like in New York, like when you tell me about that Warlock publicity stunt, that's such a New York thing to do. And I think of like Dr. Butcher, MD, all the like wild and crazy things they would do to advertise that, and back at 42nd Street, stuff like Maniac, the crazy stuff they would do to advertise that, and obviously it would be kind of run and gun kind of thing. They would never get permission, so it's kind of funny that even in '91 they were still doing some of those kind of shady publicity stunts.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. So there was a number of deleted scenes from this film. Some of them were in the trailer. There was a so first off, they cut from the initial trailer had Warlock being described as a satanic messiah. They actually cut that because there was negative test reactions from test screenings. Okay, cool. The channel is deaf, so the scene with the seance, which for me is one of my favorite scenes in the movie because it freaked me out when I was a kid, and it still freaks me out
Yeah,
now. Because again, it comes back to the great practical makeup effects. And there's something about the makeup effects back then, where they can kind of the way they distort their faces with the latex and stuff like that. But especially in this movie, because the actress herself already had very kind of sharp features of her, especially like the jawline
yeah,
and stuff. But the stuff that they kind of add on it, and then the lenses and the teeth and everything, I think that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Supposedly, her
yeah,
death was actually much more violent than what was seen in the movie when he takes her, eyeballs out and uses it as a compass. Again, another
yeah,
cool kind of witch thing to have in there. And there's another scene where a actress in the film, I don't know who it was, is topless and she's frozen, and then the devil's eyeballs emerge from her breasts. And again, they took this out because the practical effect of that looked more comedic than horrific, and people were actually laughing at the scene. And you can actually see a
yeah,
little bit of this in the trailer. If you look at the original trailer, there's a scene where Julian Sands is talking to like a frozen like statue kind of creature. That's what that was from. But they got rid of that as well from both the film and the other new trailers that kind of came out. But when it comes to actual scenes in the movie, Michael, I just spoke before. One of my favorite scene in the movie is the seance scene because again, it freaked me out so much. I watched it again a couple nights ago. It still freaked me out because of just everything, the voice effects, the performance, the
yeah.
whole kind of aspect of it. What kind of scenes kind of do you kind of like think of that really kind of stand out for you in this movie?
The Mennonite sequence definitely always was, there's so many kind of great set pieces. There's so much, a lot of world building about like the rules. with the pentagram, the nails. Um, yeah, don't look into his eyes. Like there's a lot of elements that are really juggling that sequence. But I feel like the sound sequence is also great, just because it shows his maliciousness, right?
Mm.
Him just invading people's homes, and getting what he wants from them, and then giving them horrific deaths. Which I feel like in the sequel they take it a whole other level. I feel like you're mentioning a lot of these deleted scenes. They feel so at home with the second one, where
Mm.
it's much more mean spirited, more operatic version of that character. But which just shows how the fine line this movie straddles, that or the sequel, both sequels really stomp on and really go over the top. But this one just there's a really sense of classiness. There's horrific moments, but it never goes too far.
Another scene. Oh, actually, I just want to talk about the Mennonite scene that you talked about. You know what I really love about that scene is that it's 300 years removed from where these people are from. Yet you still
Yes.
have kind of like a practitioner of this Christian sect of religion that still
Hmm.
knows the signs. What does he say? He was saying to his son. His son's kind of like he has a son in the film. He's on a farm. He's working with his son, and the son's kind of like more of a modern kind of guy. He wears a baseball cap and everything. And he says to the son, "You know the signs: the horse that sweats, the what is it? The milk that doesn't curdle, the bread that doesn't rise." Or
Yes.
it's like you know the signs, you know what's going on. And I thought it was really cool that you have this guy, who I think some maybe his son's thinking, "Oh, my dad was just a Mennonite kook when he was younger, and he took us to church too many times, and all this kind of stuff." He ends up being right at the end of the day with all of the things that he always talked about beforehand, and he goes on the ladder and he does the kind of like the pentagram, and he's there trying to capture the witch, and he's there trying to put the blinds on. I thought it was a real kind of it is a really great sequence. I think it works really well because of how that character is portrayed in the film. He doesn't come
Yeah.
across as kooky whatsoever. He's kind of like a guy who's in the know. He knows what to do, and he's going to help Redfern try to track this witch down. He does get a very kind of like bloody kind of consequences for it, because
Yeah.
of the evil eye and such. Again, another great element that they bring into the film. But I just thought that whole sequence worked so well because of how the character and the actor who portrayed him does it through that sequence as well.
Yeah, it feels very real. It doesn't feel like an actor. It feels like they found somebody who really is of that world. But even with the son, like there's just a hint that the backstory that the son has seen this and probably was repressing this,
Mm,
at this experience. But the moment when he says you know the signs, and when he walks away, you really feel like he knows, right? So I
yeah.
I love that little kind of thing that they touch on. You feel like, oh, there's like another movie there that we didn't see.
How about you want to make a bet that the next day that son takes off his baseball cap and puts on the old garb and starts growing his beard out? I think he really
Yeah,
embraces.
yeah,
He's like he's seen some stuff now. He's seen a guy flying across his farmland, and he's seen his father bleed from his eyeballs. He's seen some
yeah.
stuff now for sure. Um, So there's an unfortunate kind of consequence that came from this movie, and I'm not blaming the movie at all. I don't do that, but I do believe there are crazy people who take the movies a little too seriously. So there was a case back in 21st of January 1996. This goes back to the scene where the Warlock finds the unchristened boy, and he uses the boy's fat. Which again, when I watched this film the first time, absolutely horrific kind of concept to come
It
with me.
is, yes.
Where for a witch to fly, he doesn't use a broom. He drinks the fat from an unchristened child. And so in 21st of June 1996, 14-year-old Sandy Charles from, you have to help me with this because it's Canadian pronunciation, Saskatchewan?
Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan, thank you. Apologies to all of my Canadian friends and people watching right here. Stood trial for the murder of a 7-year-old boy inspired by a scene from Warlock. So he, having
Oh,
watched the film
geez.
at least 10 times, actually believed he could acquire the power of flight by consuming the boiled fat of his victim, an unbaptized virgin child based on a ritual described in the screenplay. So the defendant was charged first-degree murder, tried as an adult, and various sources state that Charles was sentenced to a mental health facility and was still in custody as of 2015. So this was like 11 years ago when this article came out. Sometimes you hear about these things where, because I'm a heavy metal fan as well, and so like I remember like when I was growing up, the whole Satanic Panic was very big, even here in Australia,
Yes.
about the influences of horror movies and heavy metal and all that kind of stuff come to it. And for me, like I don't believe I don't believe in any way that a movie or a song or anything can influence a person to do things, at least not a sane person. But I think some
Hmm.
people are just crazy. And when crazy kind of meets kind of like, can get inspiration from anywhere. And sometimes it might come from a movie. John Hinckley, for example, with Taxi Driver, that's another example of
Yes.
that. These things sometimes come up, right? And it's kind of horrific to think about that there could have been someone nutty enough to, even at the age of 14 years old, to try to do something like this after watching what is, a movie about a warlock with a ponytail flying across farmland mid USA. I mean, it's kind of it's very unfortunate and crazy to think about this stuff. And have you heard of this before? Because it was news to me when I was
I feel
researching
like
it.
vaguely ages I completely forgot about it. So now, you got me wanting to look into it again. But I think I remember when it did happen. But yeah.
It's
But
crazy,
but
crazy
again,
stuff.
it speaks to the power of the film. I feel like again, as horrible as it is, the movie does feel like as crazy it is. Like we're describing all these things. If you describe the script, it's insane. It's pretty nutty. But when you're watching the movie, there's a real sense of like a reality to it. So I could almost see somebody watching and feeling this could happen because the movie feels very authentic. Feels very grounded. As insane as it is, it feels very grounded in the way it's approached. And I guess like the performances really do. Uh, you believe it. You believe that Julian Sands is a warlock. You think all this stuff can happen. So I'm not surprised that somebody would watch it, but just shows the power of the film. I think the movie's so effectively believable in some odd way.
We talked about this, how you watch the sequels. I've only saw the Armageddon, the second one, which I didn't mind. I thought that opening scene, especially with the woman who gets pregnant and then he comes out of her, I thought that was just a this incredible kind of set piece in that movie. Supposedly, narratively, though, none of these movies connect whatsoever. They're their own separate films,
Yes,
right?
yes, 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 yes. And the second one too. I mean, like it's a great filmmaker did that. I mean, the same fellow behind like the Waxwork movies, So and also directed Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. So there's definitely this kind of heightened quality to everything that he does. So it feels very true to. I do appreciate the second one in the sense that it feels very much cut around the same cloth as the same. It feels like the same filmmaker who did those movies, and has like a very kind of theatrical aspect to it. It's much bigger, more stylized. Um, yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's completely nuts. It's bonkers. It's all over the place, but it's really entertaining. Yeah, but there's no
Um,
connection. Even the third one, no connection to the first or second. It's
and is
terrible.
Julian Sands in the third one? Or is that a different actor playing the
No,
role?
no, no, entirely different. It's the actor from who played the villain in Highlander Endgame.
Right. Okay. All right.
Yeah, he takes over the Warlock, and the Ashley Lawrence is like the female lead from Hellraiser. It's terrible. It's really really bad, but not and it doesn't have like the kind of badness that even the second one is so outlandishly over the top. Uh, and it's so bold with the visual effects, especially at the time when started playing with CGI, and it has not dated really well. But the movie's energy is pretty contagious.
Do you think there's potential for remake for a movie like Warlock, or do you think the time that it was made was perfect conditions, perfect casting for that movie to be told? Because I could think of some people who could play the character like Warlock, but I think it's kind of like there's just certain actors who just fit certain roles really well. Especially when it comes to genre movies, Robert Englund is, Freddy Krueger, like that's just like one
Yeah,
one example for him. So when they did the Jackie Earl Haley, it's like I just can't, just like that one guy, like he just fits that really well. But
yeah,
there are other examples where a character could be like maybe like updated and played by a different actor. But I think when it comes to this movie, the time it was made, the director, the casting, I think it's just a perfect synergy of all these things together. That while
yes,
you could pull off a remake, like maybe Alexander Skarsgård or something playing the Warlock character, maybe you could pull something like that off. I don't think it would just have the right, will just capture the right tone that this movie does because I think like for the movie that it is, I think it's perfect in regards to the movie that it's tried to make. I think it hit all of the elements in the film
yeah.
exactly. It from the casting to the direction to everything else. It'd be hard to kind of replicate that in any way, I think.
I agree with you. It's all, and there's a reason why it's held the test of time. And even when it came out, it was a sleeper hit. People did not see it coming. We thought it'd be just another fun genre movie. But it struck a chord with me and a lot of my friends growing up. And to this day, you watch it again, it still works. I mean, visual effects, they weren't particularly great when they came out, but it was a lower end budget movie, so it didn't work.
Mm.
You didn't mind because the concept was great and the execution worked, so you get by those things. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's all the elements, the performances, the cast, the writing, everything works. And I don't think there's a particular thing that you can exploit that you could do it again differently. Uh, I don't, again, the sequels show, right? It's a perfect storm. That movie just kind of everything kind of comes together, where the sequels kind of go on a tangent. And I feel like I don't know, I wouldn't know how you would do it. Like the movie just works, and it has a good beginning, middle, and end, and it feels like a good isolated story. There's really no need of a sequel.
I think something that could be cool is a prequel where Redfern kind of first pursues the Warlock character like back in the 17th century, like that initial start of the revenge story, up leading up to the part where he's in the tower in the changes. That could be something cool to see, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. As long as you get somebody who understands and appreciates what makes, I feel like when they ever do sequels or legacy sequels, um, they seem to sometimes forget what made the original work. And I feel like there's always this attempt to kind of revive a brand, but not understanding what makes it work. And the Nightmare on Elm Street, remake is a great example. I mean, you get a first class an Academy Award nominated actor, and you don't get any of the magic. They go darker, and not understanding the sense of humor is a big part of those movies. It's a tricky balance. It's to make, yeah, I can't think of many remakes or reboots that capture the spirit of the original. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but it's such a difficult
I
thing.
can't. Yeah, it's very difficult. Even kind of like legacy sequel stuff. Like I thought the first of the three David what was his name? David Gordon Green, is that the director who did the Halloween?
Halloween, yes.
Yeah, it's a Halloween. I thought the first of the three was pretty cool, but yeah, the other
I
two
agree. I agree.
kind of
Yeah.
yeah. We've had an Exorcist they totally fudged as well. So I don't know, what's gonna
Yeah, The Exorcist
happen
is
with
a
those
good
films.
example. The Exorcist is
Yeah.
a great example of a series that can't capture what the first one did. Even though I do love the third. I love the third because it's an entirely different thing. And I
Mm.
feel like that Exorcist 3 is essentially the Halloween 3 of that franchise. The one that kind of sticks out as its own kind of thing and does its own thing. And it's in time, it's grown to, people have grown to really appreciate it. But yeah, it's a but the original even Exorcist movies are so difficult to make, and I feel like nothing has come close to The Exorcist. I mean,
Mm.
the Conjuring movies are a lot of fun. But you got a great craftsman and
James
behind
Wan,
those
yeah.
movies. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
with James Wan, and but they're so difficult to make because Exorcist establishes all the tropes so perfectly, and also much, okay, far more than Warlock, but it's such grounded in a reality. It feels so real. You watch it, it feels like a documentary.
It is a fantastic movie, and I'm so glad, Michael, to be able to talk to you today. For everyone out there listening, I do highly recommend you check out Michael Pereira's work. I'm going to have all the links down in the show notes so you can check out all the socials and also check out the Beyond the Chamber of Terror. Watch it now on Tubi. Michael, what's coming up next for you in regards to filmmaking? Have you got any things in the fire, so to speak, for your future projects?
Yes, I'm currently working on a psychological thriller. This is uh my roots on genre is like I grew up on Alfred Hitchcock, Brian De Palma, like Argento. Those were the guys I grew up on, and Hitchcock in particular was like all my first time I noticed who filmmakers were was
Mhm.
Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho, where you start seeing the filmmaking behind it, because Hitchcock was not subtle about his craft. De Palma to a whole other level. So I've been wanting to make a movie like that and do something entirely different. So I have one that we're currently working on. Hopefully happening this year, but we'll see. Things are looking good, but you never know in this industry.
Until then, make sure everyone check out Beyond the Chamber of Terror and also keep updated on with Michael's stuff. I'm going to have all the links, like I said, down in the show notes. I will also have the link for Warlock for people who haven't watched it. As you can tell, Michael and I are highly going to recommend this movie for people to watch.
Yes.
And then maybe check out the second movie as well. I thought the second movie was okay. I thought
It's a
as a
lot of
sequel.
fun. It's fun. It's fun.
It is fun. And this was fun as well. Michael, thank you so very much for your time today. Thank you for talking all things Warlock, and hopefully we can do something like this again in the future.
For sure. No, thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.